not what is my identity, but what is my alterity. Who is it I'm talking to? Who is my interlocutor? If you read, for example, my Islamic liberation theology, I use the example of Malcolm X as the best case study of how, in fact, alterity, not who you are, but who it is that you are revolting against, defines your politics. As you know, Malcolm X begins as a regular thug in Boston. Then he converts to Islam. And when he converts to Islam, he is a big supporter of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. But soon he is disappointed. And at the stage that he's with Elijah Muhammad and a supporter of the Nation of Islam, he thinks whites are devil. Until he makes a Hajj pilgrimage. And in opening the space of the Hajj pilgrimage, he realizes that that nonsense of the identity of white, this is a fabricated idea. So he abandons the Nation of Islam. He abandons Elijah Muhammad. Of course, he comes to know certain unsavory facts about Elijah Muhammad as well. And opens his own mosque and so forth. But even beyond that, he moves to Africa. He moves to Latin America. In New York, he meets with a Cuban delegation. So at the conclusion of that chapter on Malcolm X, I write that true revolutionary authenticity means cultural inauthenticity. So it is an argument against identity politics. Now, here you might say, well, when Mexicans are under attack, okay, when Muslims are under attack, when women are under attack, should they not have identity politics, namely do what Tocqueville in Democracy in America calls voluntary associations. Voluntary associations become a nexus, as in fact it has already happened. Certain university campuses in US have now declared themselves to be safe zones, refugees zones. So if you're, for example, if your visa expires or if you ran out of your stipend, etc., state authorities are not allowed to come and force you to go, as they did, for example, to us back in 1979 when the Iranian Revolution happened and I was a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania. When the hostages were taken in Iran, we were told to go and report to immigration authorities and take our pictures and fingerprints and so forth. Now, cities, for example, Mayor de Blasio has declared New York to be a safe zone. Or state of New York, Governor Cuomo has declared to be a safe zone. So nobody will be arrested and deported and so forth. So there is an extraordinary moment in American federalism and state authority and city authorities and so forth. Now, in that context, what Tocqueville, in the middle of the 19th century, when he was writing Democracy in America, considered to be the hallmark of the protection of individual against the tyranny of a state. His basic argument in Democracy in America is simple, that class, that you have it in classical aristocratic societies, yes, they are a barrier against equality, but they are also a barrier against state absolutism. So in the condition of, in democratic condition, he said, individuals become atomized. The state becomes very thick, increasingly a state authority becomes very thick, individuals become atomized, which is what Sir Ralph Dahrendorf, for example, talks about in Nazi Germany, the process that they call Gleichschaltung, coordination, that the more a state becomes totalitarian, the more atomized becomes the individual. So even every university has to be part of the state party apparatus. Any club, any mosque, there was no mosque, any church has to be part of the state apparatus. Tocqueville's insight is that the genius of American democracy is the possibility of voluntary associations. Now, about 100 years after Tocqueville, in her book on revolution, Hannah Arendt also recognized the space between the state and public sphere that is generated by what Thomas Jefferson had called ward, W-A-R-D, ward. And Hannah Arendt, comparing French and American Revolution, she was very critical of the way Marxists have read French Revolution, and she was much more appreciative of American Revolution because for her, revolution was social revolution, not economic revolution. And social revolution meant the possibility of liberty by which, and she was the first one to read the phrase pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. She read the pursuit of happiness as pursuit of public happiness, public participation. So if you put Tocqueville, middle of the 19th century, and Hannah Arendt, middle of the 20th century, together, the notion of voluntary association that protects you, now this voluntary association could be all the Arabs in New York get together, or all the women form an organization, or all Democrats, or all Columbia University students, whatever. Any voluntary association that protects the individual against the encroachment of the state can create that space of identity, but identity that, right now, as you know, the question of white and black as codification of relation of power has actually become quintessential. In the sense that last year when I was teaching my Intro to Islamic Civ, and we were talking about black Islam, Muslims' history in the United States. One of my students said, yes, Bilal al-Habashi was the first black Muslim. And I said, no, Bilal al-Habashi is not a black Muslim. Bilal al-Habashi, Bilal Abyssinia, was one of the comrades of the Prophet. He came from Abyssinia. Black is a social construct, was made in the United States. In fact, initially, the African slavery had nothing to do with the color of the skin, had to do with, they were pagans, they were not Christian. And then they soon realized that Christianity, they could convert to Christianity, then they will lose their status as a slave. Then color codification became an issue. So gender and racial codification of relation of power now has assumed a reality sui generis. So that, for example, Michelle Alexander, who recently wrote a magnificent book, The New Jim Crow, this is a book published early 2000, she is completely oblivious of successive generation of Muslims and Arabs and Latinos who have come to the United States subjected to this similar kind of racialization, at the center of which stands a fictive white man, not person, that unless and until you deconstruct that fiction, it keeps creating brown skin, black skin, gendered, etc. So there is a discrepancy, for example, between what our distinguished colleague Judith Butler says about gender. Constitution of the gender is iteration. You keep iterating a certain particular kind of behavior, and then you become a woman. You know, it goes back to Simone de Beauvoir, the first sentence of The Second Sex. Nobody is born a woman, you become a woman. It's meaning the social construct. If you're not careful with the manner in which you identify with the politics, I as a Muslim, I as a Arab, I as a this and a that becomes quintessential to who you are. And you forget the environment that fabricates this kind of identity politics. So how do we, the dialectic as a result that emerges between my proclivity not for identity but for alterity, to whom am I talking, and the fact that identity politics can procure a kind of a protection, social protection, in the environment of Trumpism. My response to both Mark Leyla and to Catherine Franke is that, yes, identity politics is a reality which is imposed on you. I always say sarcastically, I became a Muslim on 9/11. Well, of course, I was born a Muslim. I am a Muslim. But on 9/11, because Muslims are under attack and identity politics becomes under attack, you don't have a choice. You become a Muslim. Right now, today was another tape on YouTube, on Facebook. Some guy just said, "MashaAllah, Alhamdulillah, wa rahmah wa sahlan," and was thrown out of airplane. It happens regularly in the United States. So you don't have a choice. Your stereotypes chase after you. You don't have a choice in the matter. Muslim registry. The funny face is now those Iranians, Arabs who say, "I'm secular." There is no secular. There doesn't exist. Secularity doesn't exist. You're a Muslim. So you say, "Well, I'm an atheist Muslim or a secular Muslim." It doesn't make sense to a Muslim registry. Between the fact that the identity is imposed on you, is socially constructed as imposed on you, you may have any kind, you may get up in the morning with Abu al-Ala